Join me for a little walk back in history. The year 2016 marked a critical rupture in both the American and British story. Brexit happened in June. Trump happened in November. Moments when abandoned the larger stories that once bound their people together and instead embraced politics of division. These political earthquakes rejected globalization, diversity, and democratic norms in favor of narrower identities rooted in grievance and nostalgia. And by ceding this identity debate to demagogues, Democratic leaders failed to confront the deeper crises of inequality that were corroding their societies. Neoliberalism had promised upward economic mobility, but what ordinary people experienced were stagnant wages and the soaring cost of living. Fast forward to this week. Donald Trump touches down in Britain. The royal fanfare, castles, carriage rides, flyovers could not obscure the grim realities that are just beyond the palace gates. For Trump, the currency of power has never been policy or principle. It's flattery. The louder, the gaudier, the more groveling, the better. And Britain's pageantry served it up on a silver platter. But beneath the gilded surface lay a cautionary tale. Britain was once the center of empire. It exported its power. It imposed its identity abroad. And now that empire has come home. Immigrants from Britain's former colonies have reshaped that nation's population. Its economy has slipped behind the rising East. Brexit, sold as a way to take back control, has left the country poorer, more isolated, and no closer to solving its core problems. Meanwhile, many Americans wrestled with a parallel fear that by extending the American dream to others, to newcomers, they themselves had lost out. Opportunistic politicians turned that fear into a zero-sum game where one group's gains equals another group's loss. Xenophobia and paranoia took root, eagerly stoked by demagogues. As Ben Rhodes puts it, quote, in the summer of 2016, British voters severed their relationship with the European Union, motivated by a nationalist backlash to globalization. A few months later, American voters stepped into the same undertow, electing a president who railed against immigration and international norms, institutions, and obligations. Within a matter of months, both nations turned against their own stories, end quote. Both nations turned against their own stories. And yet, almost a decade later, neither nation is better off. Britain has stagnated. Its value in the world has shrunk. And the far right, embodied by Nigel Farage's Reform UK party, is stronger than ever. Post-Brexit Britain should be a flashing red warning for America about the dangers of isolationism that are dressed up as exceptionalism. Here at home, Trump has wielded the power of the state not to protect democracy, but to reward his friends, to punish his enemies, and to elevate a narrow identity: white, Christian, and conservative. Deportations militarized, policing militarized, legal powers meant to confront foreign enemies turned inward against immigrants and the so-called radical left. As Ben Rhodes notes, here in America, too, the empire has come home. But here's the deeper problem. America's national story itself has broken down. For more than a century, being American meant believing in the chance to rise, the idea that hard work could deliver success. That story, the American dream, carried enormous power, even though it was unevenly applied. But today, faith in that very story is collapsing. A decade ago, more than half of all Americans believed in the dream. Today, just over a third do. For millions, the promise of neoliberalism was an illusion. According to Rhodes, quote, neoliberalism hollowed out communities while enriching a global oligarchy. Democrats understandably have a hard time fathoming why Americans would put our democracy at risk. But we miss the reality that our democracy is part of what angers them. Many voters have come to associate democracy with globalization, corruption, financial capitalism, migration, forever wars. And elites like me who talk about it as an end in itself rather than a means to redressing inequality and reining in capitalist systems that are rigged. Here's the thing. Many Americans are rightly angry at a system that feels like it bleeds them dry, then gaslights them into believing that they are the leeches. People feel betrayed. They're exhausted. They feel unheard, and it would be cruel to say, I told you so, in the face of Trump's relentless assaults on the working and middle class. What we need more than ever is empathy. We already have enough contempt and resentment to go around the world several times over, but the truth is Washington has failed workers. Workers are more productive than ever, yet their wages, adjusted for inflation, have remained flat for the better part of the last 50 years. It started to change in the last few years. Costs of housing, health care, and child care have soared. Families are drowning in medical debt and student loans. Nearly half of Americans now work in jobs that qualify as low wage. People look at their lives and they see a system that isn't working. And they don't believe that, quote, protecting democracy, end quote, will fix that. Because for too many, democracy didn't pay the bills. It didn't provide adequate health care. It never made college accessible. The other guy is worse is not a winning message for struggling families. And that's the real danger. Cynicism is just as corrosive as authoritarianism. When voters believe that both sides are beholden to money, not to them, they tune out. And grievance, fear, and demagoguery fill that vacuum. That is why Britain's warning is so urgent. America risks the same cul-de-sac of decline if we keep ceding identity to those who weaponize it. If leaders don't reclaim the story, if they don't offer people a vision of dignity, belonging, and shared purpose, demagogues will do it for them. But that requires leaders who embrace change. As Rhodes argues, the only way forward is for Democratic leaders to pair their vision of an inclusive America with a populist challenge to the broken system that Donald Trump now controls, emphasizing real reform, not just shifting money around. Quote, out of the wreckage of this election, Democrats must reject the impulse to simply be a resistance that condemns whatever outrageous thing Mr. Trump says. While confronting Mr. Trump when we must also focus on ourselves, what we stand for, and how we tell our story. That means acknowledging the narrative of liberalism and democracy collapsed. Rhodes adds, instead of defending a system that has been rejected, we need to articulate an alternative vision for what kind of democracy comes next. Populations in both Britain and America will only grow more diverse. Power in the world will only become more diffuse as China rises. The question is whether the West meets that change with fear or with a story of common purpose.